In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 tips on how I live harmoniously with my family members, even when they are unaware of spirituality. The first tip that I want to share is about setting boundaries. When you just have a spiritual awakening, you need your quiet space and time alone. You need to protect your energy because at the initial stage, it's easier for you to be triggered by other people's ego. You are in a new space, you're still getting used to this newfound energy. During my first spiritual awakening, I was called to write books. I was working at home most of the time, and my parents were retired, so they are at home. And it's always too noisy outside. I can't focus on my writing. My mom will come into the room whenever she needed something, and it can be very distracting. So I will shut my door. Now I do it less because they're used to not distracting me when I'm working or writing. It is also not just about setting physical boundary, it's also about setting time boundary. If you need quiet time to do your meditation in the morning, you will need to carve out a space for your meditation and also a specific time to do your meditation. And this requires great communication, which brings me to my second point, which is to communicate with compassion and understanding. Setting boundaries is not enough. Clear communication is needed. Living in a household, everyone has different needs. You may want to do meditation, that's great, but your spouse may want to scroll their social media in the morning. Then you cannot say that, oh, meditation is good for you, social media is bad for you, you shouldn't be doing social media. Remember, we sign up for spiritual growth and transformation, but our spouse or family member didn't. However, your change may affect them and they may not like it. They may think, you mean now I have to take care of the kids while you're meditating. When it comes to your family or living together with someone, we have to come together and communicate our needs and come to a consensus. We have to work things out so that most of our needs are met. In my family, we didn't have the shutting the door policy until I started it. In the beginning, when I shut my doors, I will always tell my family members, I'm closing my door. I'm not unhappy with you. I just need to focus on my work. Because my mom might take it the wrong way. Like, do you find me annoying? Do you find me too noisy? You don't like me anymore? And to make things even clearer, I even have 3 different levels. One is open door, means you can walk in and talk to me anytime. Number 2 is closed door. That means you still can walk in and take your stuff, but don't talk to me unless it's really important. And third is to have the do not disturb sign. Usually when I put this, it's because I'm having a Zoom call with someone else. Also, you have to communicate with them several times. Sometimes when you tell them once, they will forget about it and they will still do it. It's not that they are deliberate in stepping in your boundary. It's just habits. They're so used to interacting with you in a certain way, and now you change, it will take some time for them to cope with this change. You kind of have to train them to interact with this new you. But setting boundaries and communicating them is still not enough. You may still meet resistance from a family member who really don't like that you're changing. Or they may have some expectation of who they want you to be, and you're not meeting their expectation. So what do? You can allow them to be where they are and see them as your spiritual teacher, which is the third tip. When you face resistance from family members, the worst thing you can do is to push against the resistance. You will get into conflict with your family members like, why do they not understand me? Why are they against my growth? And instead of resisting their resistance, what you want to do is like a Tai Chi. A fight cannot occur when there is no opposing side. So they may not like your changes, but you're not taking them too seriously because you know they're acting from their level of consciousness. Your family member, especially your parents, are like the best spiritual teacher you can find. Parent-child relationship are like other relationships. The dynamics are never equal. It will never be equal because your parents will always see you as their baby boy or their baby girl, and they have seen you when you're so little. Your friends, your colleagues, and your spouse have not seen you when you're little. So it's very easy to get triggered by your parents. But also take note that it's your ego reacting to another person's ego. Ideally, if you are spiritually awakened and the people around you are also spiritually awakened too, then you don't have to do any work, right? You will not get triggered. But it doesn't work this way because you have such a history with your parents. It's likely that your past wounds still exist after you are spiritually awakened, and they will be the ones to bring out those past childhood wounds when you stay with them. Instead of resenting them for not changing and not growing, let these triggers be your guide. My dad, for the longest time, didn't like that I gave up my job as an accountant to become an animator and then become a writer. At one point, he even says, "Who will want to read your books?" And I don't resent him for saying that because I could see that he doesn't feel like he can do it. That's why he projects it onto me and thinks that I cannot do it too. Even for me, when I just started writing, I was actually doubting whether it can be a viable career for me. So if I can have these doubts, it's understandable that my parents will have such doubts too. What I realized is that I have to be mindful of who I share my dreams with, even if they are my family members or the people closest to me. Because I realized that when I tell my dad what I was doing, I was actually trying to get validation from him. I was trying to convince him that pursuing writing as a career for me is good. But if I was so sure and convinced about my career choice, then I didn't need to convince anyone. So I stopped telling my family members what I do, and it stopped activating their fear and their doubts, and they stopped projecting their fears and doubt onto me. Over time, my dad actually stopped talking about my writing career. He saw that I wasn't asking money from him and I was happy, and even though I didn't tell him what I do exactly and he doesn't understand, he was somewhat convinced that I was actually doing okay. He started to have faith and respect for what I do. Every time, the more triggered I am, I realize the more inner work I need to do. I have to learn to be more grounded and centered, even when people are acting from their ego, even when they are fearful or unkind sometimes. I have to stay present. The more you work on yourself, you'll find that the people around you oppose you less because no one is reacting to their ego. It's like Tai Chi. Tip number 4, don't share your spiritual experience with them. Apart from what I do as a living, I also don't share any spiritual experiences with my family members. I quickly learned that for someone to respect my boundary, I have to respect their boundary too, which means that I'm not going to share anything that they are not interested in. I talk more about this in this video that I recorded a while ago. You can go check it out. And this isn't being fake or inauthentic. The more you try to share with them, the more they think that you're trying to convert them or get them to believe something that they don't believe. You're pushing their belief system and they will push back. It's not your job and responsibility to get them to be spiritually awakened. If you just continue with your spiritual practice without telling them what you're doing, they may get curious and ask you what you're doing one day. It's just like I was meditating one day in my room and my mom came up to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Meditation." Then she asked, "What is it about?" Then I just explained it to her and she started doing some kind of meditation on her own by listening to some chanting music. Even though they don't believe in what you do and may not want to do what you do, if your vibration is that of peace and joy, they may want to know what you're doing. If you do want to share spirituality with your family, share it with good humor. Don't be too serious like you have to meditate every day. It helps you to stay less fearful and be more calm. My dad and I never talk about spirituality, but the days leading up to his death, he was feeling some neck discomfort and I was doing this energy transfer on his neck. I say like, "Let me try." And he felt the heat on his neck and he was like, "What are you doing?" But he said he felt good, it's very relaxing. And he asked me to do it on other family members like my mom and my brother. We'll just have some fun and some laughter. He doesn't understand what I'm doing, but he's willing to explore it with me. Everyone will have their own divine timing on when they are going to be spiritually awakened, and you have to respect that. Number 5 is practice discernment. I know if I say just allow your family to be where they are, some people are going to misunderstand and say that, oh, my family is toxic and I'm just going to stay there and suffer. That's where discernment is an important practice when it comes to spirituality. It depends on how conscious they are. Are they merely uninterested in spirituality, or are they hostile towards you? If they are uninterested, you can still work with them. If they're hostile, maybe the best is to leave them alone and move into a new environment. Again, it's back to tip number 1. You need to know your own boundaries. You need to know how much you can be with the other person without rocking your inner peace. Sometimes being triggered is great for inner work. It helps you to get more into alignment. But sometimes if you find it difficult to get into alignment consistently with all these triggers, then perhaps it's time for you to leave and let go of some of the unhealthy relationships. Only you will be able to tell when to let go. And you can always consult your intuition. But whether you choose to leave your family members or not, what's more important is to check how you feel about them. If there's a lot of resentment and even hatred towards your parents or your family members, you may want to check out this next video on forgiveness.